This is Carol Westcott, owner of the Voice Within Studio. This is the first in a series of videos talking about breathing for singing. You might have noticed that I've put out several other videos, and this is the first video I've done talking about the breath. And there's a reason for that. Oftentimes I'm meeting with a new student and we work through their lesson, and then they get to the end and they start looking a little upset. And then they say, "You didn't talk about the breath." And they get very upset. And then I say, "Well, you're breathing fine." And that they don't know what to do with that, because nowadays when I meet with new students, it's not as if I'm teaching somebody who's never heard anything about singing. Now, with the internet, people are online, they're looking at videos like this video, and trying to learn how to sing from videos. And then unfortunately you run into a great deal of misinformation. There's already been a great deal of misinformation in this field just because of how the field operates, because people who teach voice often are just simply people who sing, who were taught by someone else how to sing and didn't actually specifically study something called pedagogy, which is how to teach singing. And when you study pedagogy, you learn anatomy, physiology, voice science, vocal health, and more the mechanics of how the voice functions. And this is why there's so many different controversies about breathing. But breathing doesn't have to be complicated. I like to teach a natural breath, and we'll talk about that in future videos. Today, we're just going to talk through all the myths about breathing. Breathing is natural. We don't have to be taught how to breathe. I don't disagree. I mean, we are a wind instrument as singers. Our vocal cords are vibrating because they're holding back air. That's how this instrument functions. Now, you always have air in your lungs. If you didn't, you'd be dead. So, one big myth, first myth, is that you have to take in a large amount of air to be able to sing. And actually, the opposite is true. If you take in too much air, your poor vocal cords, which are very small, can't stay closed when they're vibrating. So if I demo on the lip trill, which is a really great way to understand how the breath and vocal cords function. If I take in a big breath, try to do my lip trill, my poor little lips can't stay together, and which means my poor little vocal cords can't stay together. What if I just simply took a natural breath, very much the same breath I would take if I were just talking. I'm just sitting here and I'm like, okay, I'm going to just make this noise. No big deal. I could hold that forever. I know I had a little bobble at the start, just didn't have that air pressure built up, but it's really fascinating if I could exhale and still hold that for a decent amount of time, because there's air in my lungs. And the reason why the vocal cords are vibrating is because they're holding back air. So what we'll be doing is we're going to be breathing for the situation. We'll be taking in the amount of air that's appropriate for the phrase that we're singing. And there's some other variables according to where we are in our range and what's happening. So there's no one set formula for breathing. The other myth is that you have to actively take a breath. You have to put a lot of effort into this inhale. Well, keeping in mind, if I put a lot of effort into taking the inhale, well, what happens? My vocal cords constrict, my throat gets tight, makes it very difficult to sing. And also people along those lines believe that you have to feel the air coming in. Well, if I feel the air coming in, I'm constricting. So we're better off just taking a very natural, quiet, silent breath. No big deal. So then let's talk a little bit about where the air goes. You hear constantly, I breathe from my diaphragm, I sing from my diaphragm. Well, Air goes into your lungs. That's it. Doesn't go into your stomach. Air goes into your lungs. Now, you've got a great deal of structure in that territory. You have ribs. You do have a diaphragm. It is a dome-shaped muscle that sits underneath your lungs. And the diaphragm is functioning 24/7. When it raises, air is expelled from the lungs. And when it lowers, it helps, along with your ribs, to expand the cavity in order to kind of suck the air in. So it kind of operates like a turkey baster where the opening will draw air in. That's why we don't feel ourselves breathing. Our diaphragm is not under any kind of direct control. This is completely an involuntary situation. Your diaphragm is operating 24/7 to keep you alive. So I cannot control it in any sort of way. I can move some body parts, like obviously some of the abdominal muscles connect to the diaphragm, but we cause ourselves a lot of problems if we get too aggressive with the abs. Now, again, I'm not going to say some of these body parts aren't working. If you do a lip trill, start low, go to high, something's going on. I mean, there's definitely engagement. There is some engagement in some of these internal abdominal muscles, but I am not really doing anything. I'm just making sound, and the lip trill is a great example because having the lips closed creates the back pressure, helps keep those vocal cords vibrating. So, many people think they have to tighten their abs, squeeze their abs, do all sorts of things really aggressively with their abs. And you can always do science experiments because there are some variables here. Different people have different physical formations, people have different strengths. So there's no one breathing method that works for everyone. So one thing you can do is experiment with singing with the abs tight. I encourage my students to have a test song. It's a song that you can try some of these things out so that you can see, well, what works. If you've got Somewhere Over the Rainbow, if I just do Somewhere Over the Rainbow, okay? Now I'm going to try to sing that with tight abs. Somewhere over the rainbow. Well, that's not going very well because if you just sit here and really tighten those abs, what do we notice? My throat gets really tight because those body parts connect. So tighten my abs, tighten my throat. So don't want to tighten our abs. But we should have really optimal body alignment and stability. And then there's going to be some things that we're going to be doing with our alignment to help support our sound. It's another myth. This idea, the word support, gets thrown around constantly. I'm going to support my sound, support my breath. Well, again, you don't have a lot of direct control. So support is something, it's such a nebulous term. I really prefer to not use it. I'd rather say, let's make sure that we have really optimal body alignment, that we have stability, that we are singing very efficiently, because people are so focused on what's going on below the vocal cords and they're not aware of what's going on above the vocal cords. So all the breath in the world is not going to solve all of our problems. If someone is constricting in their laryngeal muscles, the breath isn't helping them because they're keeping their vocal cords from vibrating efficiently due to the tension. So that has to be addressed. Working on the breath won't help that problem. We also are not thinking a lot about what's happening above the vocal cords in terms of how we shape the space. If someone is not really efficient with their resonance, then they're not going to get good tone and they're not going to be efficient with the breath, because if I'm singing a vowel sound and it's too open, then my vocal cords can't stay closed and they can't vibrate efficiently. And so again, the breath isn't going to solve that problem. If I'm too open, well, that worked a lot better. That really didn't have anything to do with what I was doing with the air. In fact, having the vocal tract shaped in a way that was more efficient allowed my vocal cords to vibrate in a more optimal way, and therefore the breath worked better. When the space is not quite right for the pitches you're on, too much air passes through the vocal cords. We need some back pressure to help our vocal cords vibrate. That is why the lip trill is such an efficient exercise. And that takes me to breathing exercises. I don't believe in practicing breathing just to practice breathing. We breathe perfectly fine. I would rather work on making sound and coordinating that with the breath. Again, back to lip trills, which are generally pretty perfect in terms of I can't use the breath incorrectly. It just won't work. So I encourage everybody to think about these myths that are really pervasive in our field. In future videos, we'll be talking more about the mechanics of breathing. This was just to cover the myths and the bad information, just to get you on the right track. This is Carol Westcott from the Voice Within studio. I teach voice lessons online. If you'd like to study with me, you can look at my website at thevoicewithinstudio.com, and you can book a lesson online. Also, I have a self-study program through Teachable, and the link is below. Thanks so much for listening, and we'll be looking for future videos about the mechanics of breathing. Thank you.